special broadcast. We are live in Cape Town, where yesterday, I think, in many people's eyes, perhaps South Africa turned a corner. For the next hour, we're going to be dissecting into Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana's 2026-2027 national budget. I normally, when I report on budgets, I like to characterize them in terms of who overall that budget is for. So I would often say something along the lines, oh no, this one was for the markets. Or maybe say, no, this one was for the consumer. Or maybe this one was for the rating agencies. I have to say, for the 2026-27 national budget, it was different. And therefore, my answer is different. This time, I'm saying this was for the country. But I've got a panel of experts with me here who perhaps understand this issue better than me. My job is easy. All I have to do is to ask them questions. Let me introduce them for the benefit of our viewers on television. To my immediate left is Deputy Minister David Masondo, Deputy Minister of Finance of South Africa. Let's welcome him, please. Next to him is Edward Kisweta, the Commissioner for the South African Revenue Services. Please, a big hand for him. I don't know who needs an introduction to Busima Vuso, CEO, Business Leadership, South Africa. Welcome, Busi. Next to her is Zinhle Tlikwe, Chief Executive Officer, the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa. Welcome, ma'am. And last but not least, David Wanaka, Adjust Associate Professor, Head of Income Tax, Technical BDO. Welcome, David. Deputy Minister, let me start with you. Of course, you were involved in structuring this budget. Let me get what you and the people at the National Treasury were thinking of in terms of the priorities that you set out for 2026-2027?
It was to turn the corner. And indeed, I think that's another way of characterizing this budget, maybe also future budgets. And the question that you may have to ask is not just about who is this budget for, has it turned the corner? And I think the corner, for me, you've got to look at periodically, the last 5 years and in the last financial year when we tabled this budget. And there's two things that are notable. The first one is we're not going to have a budget 2.0, 3.0. And what does it signify? The GNU is solid, it's working, it has matured. And we understand each other better now, because before that, we'll accuse our partners that, yeah, you guys, you're acting like you are in opposition. Can we get to work together? They will say to us, myself coming from the ANC, but you're also behaving like you are 50 plus 1. So understand, we have to do these things jointly. And I do think if you compare from last year and this budget, there's a huge, we've turned the corner in terms of making sure that this political structure, the government of national unity, works and is working very well. That's the first thing.
Consensus.
The second thing, you remember, we said we're going to increase the tax by 20 billion because we had withdrawn VAT, but we did not remove the expenditure lines that we've inserted in that budget. We've turned the corner. We did not increase tax by 20 billion, as we said, in the 2025-2026 budget. And the reason for that is not because we were afraid that we're going to repeat the 2.0 budget, 2.3 budget. is because the things that we've been doing the last 5 years, our commitment to macroeconomic stability, keeping our debt at sustainable level, is paying off. We said it's important for us to keep our debt at sustainable level. Amongst other things that we need to do is to stabilize the debt to GDP ratio, and we should do that through not only growing the economy, but making sure that as we budget, we've got the primary budget surplus. In other words, making sure that our revenue, our expenditure is not above the revenue. And we've maintained that for a while, for the last 3 years, including in this financial year. And that gave confidence to the market that these guys are serious about containing debt. And of course, debt in itself is not bad. The question is whether is the debt sustainable? Are you able to service that debt? So the debt to GDP ratios is not necessarily a formula. A required debt to GDP ratio, I mean, Japan, they are 100%, other jurisdictions, 200. The question is that, are you able to sustain that debt?
Sure.
And we said we do need to keep our debt at a sustainable level. And it's not just good for public expenditure, because if your debt is too high and the debt service costs, it begins to erode other important expenditure lines, infrastructure, education, and so on and so on. I mean, we've been spending 400 and something billion on the debt service costs. It's not just for that, but the sovereign risk premium is associated with the level of the sovereign debt.
Sure.
And if the yield is too high, it means the risk is too high, and the investors will require higher return, and the cost of capital becomes higher. Not just for us as the government, but for all economic agents. Because if an investor invests in South Africa, their floor price, it's the benchmark bond. It used to be R186. Now it's R2030. That is the price. If it's at 15%, any investor who invests in any stock, that's their floor price.
The 10-year.
Yeah. And that creates problems for our ability to attract capital, not only for government, as I said, for SMMEs, for businesses and all that. So because we manage our public finances very well, the market said, look, I mean, if you look at the 10-year bond yield has declined. It's 7.8 something now. When after the budget, it went down, but it used to be at 10. And you can also see it in the numbers that in the next 3 years, we'll be saving 10 billion rands on the debt service costs.
Sure.
And why do you raise tax when your debt service costs are also going down? And we also realize, in terms of the revenue, 21 billion against the estimate insofar as the tax revenue is concerned, and in terms of our economic growth as well, at least for the first time in many years, we are not revising economic GDP growth downwards.
Yeah.
It's 1.6, and in 2028, we're projecting it to grow by 2%. It should be at 5% if we're to halve unemployment and poverty in terms of the National Development Plan. So we're still not yet there.
Sure.
But however, the fact that we didn't raise, and also to relieve the consumer, the economic agents, it's not good to be imposing, to strengthen different economic agents under this. We said it's important for us to keep more money in the hands of the consumers, relieving SMMEs, households, and so on and so on. So I think for me, that it's we're turning the corner. Inflation is lower, and that has huge contribution towards reducing the cost of living, reducing the cost of capital, because the guys who charge us interest, they charge real interest plus inflation. And if the inflation is high, it means the cost of borrowing for different economic agents is quite high. So we are turning the corner. And of course, the task for us is how to maintain this positive momentum. We are still on course insofar as the structural reforms, including unbundling of ESCOM, Sis Busi. I know you've been making a lot of noise, and rightly so, insofar as that is concerned. And the President said, we're not retracting on that. We're forging ahead to create a wholesale electricity market. And I think these reforms are also paying off, the focus on infrastructure as well. So we are turning the corner and will keep turning more corners. Let me stop here so that I don't speak alone.
Now, I can tell you, Deputy Minister, that the relief, the tax relief is well celebrated. And I think from the commentary that I have seen everywhere, everybody totally appreciates that tax relief. And of course, the reduction in the bond yields of South Africa over the past 2-3 years, 400 basis points by some accounts, is a celebrated story in the markets. No question about that. But let me move on the discussion to the Commissioner. And say, Commissioner, how many more days do you have to close your year? Is it?
Well, 2
days.
1 month and 1 day.
1 month and 1 day. Commissioner, how was it during your tax year in terms of having to live up to the expectations that the minister set for you? I wanted to put in a little rejoinder to say, of course, I think things were made easier for you by those higher commodity prices, no?
Well, I think there's a few perspectives to bear in mind. But let me first just say the Deputy Minister has given a good expression of the things that make South Africa just a little bit more investable and a little bit more affordable. And those things have created an environment which we have to capitalize on. Because if we don't, the moment will pass. And of course, the fourth issue to the three that the Deputy Minister has mentioned is that we were removed from the FATF grey list, which also says that the Financial Action Task Force is confident or comfortable that we have the regulatory environment, the legal instruments to deal with terror financing and money laundering. What we still have to do, and the evaluation will take place later this year, what we still have to do is to demonstrate that we can enforce those laws and regulations. And one of the things that is incumbent on us is whether, in fact, we can prosecute those who have broken the law, particularly in respect of money laundering, illicit financial flows, and terror financing. That's a huge burden of proof that is incumbent on us. On the revenue side, I'm often surprised how superficial a lot of the analysis is when it gets to the revenue. And there seems to be the story that if the revenue is high, it's the economy. If the revenue is bad, it's SARS. For some strange reason. So let me first say that we believe that the positive revenue performance over the last 7 years is not an accident, but it's also not a direct correlation of what happens in the economy. Because if that were the case, then our compound annual growth rate of revenue over the last 7 years should be closer to 5 than the 7 that it is. And so you have to ask, even if you look at this year, all of the assumptions on which the modeling for the revenue estimate that the minister issues, and that modeling goes through a rigor. SARS is at the table, the Reserve Bank is at the table, tax policy, National Treasury at the table, economic policy, and they crunch the numbers, and come up with the best possible estimate. It's an estimate, by the way, not a target. With the best possible estimate based on a view of economic assumptions. A year ago, we had a more harder, positive view of what that would be. Now, a year later, most of those assumptions have actually softened. And so what drives the revenue up if the economic assumptions on which they were based had softened?
Yeah.
So the first is that we have seen a better than anticipated level of consumption taxes, domestic consumption, not import. Our imports are actually down. Wage bill is down. Gross operating surplus is down. And those are hard revenue indicators that drive the model. We've seen a better than expected consumption taxes. And that has given an uplift in domestic VAT, and excise and other consumption taxes. And secondly, it is true that particularly the mining sector and the financial sector are yielding a result that was not anticipated 12 months ago. We believe that the real benefit of the commodity will come in the new year and probably for the next 2 or 3 years. Okay. But this year, the contribution is actually probably at best 5 billion of the 21.3 billion that we have. In total, we believe our estimate is that the 21.3 billion, about a third of that will come from economic factors, and about 2/3 of that will come from just hard, consistent compliance efforts from the 14,000 men and women of SARS. Some of them I see is in the room here. They texted me earlier on to say I must smile, so I'm smiling. And for us, that's not cyclical. If it was cyclical, then we'd be in trouble next year because then the need for possibly raising taxes comes back on the table.
Yeah.
And Treasury has taken the most conservative view of revenue and have therefore maintained. They've not been overly optimistic about revenue, as they should be conservative. We believe that the shift is structural, not cyclical.
Sure.
We will be buoyed by a commodity cycle, but we've maintained the positive revenue growth year on year throughout the cycle, even when it was low, even during COVID. So we're positive that the work that has done to rebuild the institutional integrity, the focus on compliance, the investment in our people, the investment in technology and AI has borne fruit, and it will continue to bear fruit.
Could there also be some evidence that's coming up of perhaps higher economic activity out of the higher consumption revenue that you refer to?
So yeah, I mean, the behavioral dynamic behind that, firstly, a lot of that is funded by about 8.5 billion of additional money when people have withdrawn from the two-pot pension facility. So that's obviously driving it. On a sentiment side, people are more confident, and people are more confident. They engage in a lot more retail therapy. And the governor has promised lower prices, so people take a bet on their future bond payments coming down. So I think that whole effervescence in the economy, the high level of confidence, has followed through on higher domestic consumption and therefore higher domestic VAT, and we think that will be sustained over the next 2 to 3 years. And then what we really need to look at, and let me say one thing more about the revenue, and then I want to say something about the expenditure. What we really have we find a big focus was on the recovery of debt that is owed to the state, and we find that it's harder, and the level of complexity of the skills we need has shifted. This year, for example, the stock of debt has grown by 26% year on year, but the complexity of that debt has shifted from many, many millions of little people putting 10, 20, 30 rand on the table for debt to large business, corporates. And in particular, we've had a lot of success in the criminal and syndicated activities. And there, if you unwind a scheme, one scheme can put 4, 5, 6 billion onto the debt book. But you can bet your bottom dollar that when we find people who owe us debt, they don't open the door and welcome us and say, wow, I'm so glad you found us. What do I owe you? They argue with us, they fight us, they take us to court. And so the level of complexity of the mix of debt has made debt collection harder.
Yeah.
We, for example, a year ago thought we would need to scale up more of the entry-level debt collectors, which we literally take off the street and then skill up. We now find that we need more legal debt collectors, more business rescue practitioners, people who understand the complexity of credit risk assessment and do that. We've seen a significant uptake in the applications for deferred payment arrangements with a higher level of default against those arrangements. We have found that using the banks for third-party collection, the success rate is lower than last year, as well as using employers. So the environment within which debt collection takes place has shifted significantly.
Sure.
One comment on the expenditure side, I think what is really pleasing is traditionally we have spent understandably 60 cents in every 100 rand on social expenditure because of where we are as a country. I always say wealthy people like you in the room, we can buy ourselves out of pandemics and natural disasters and even poor service delivery by government. We can buy private education, poor people can't. They're stuck with the services that government provide. And for them, it's everything that they have. And so we need to spend 60 cents on every rand for that. If you then spend 21 cents on servicing debt, you're left with 18 cents for anything else. And so the gains that the Deputy Minister had referred to earlier on is also having an endowment effect that if you look at the expenditure growth this year, about 9.7% has gone towards capital expenditure, whilst the overall budget has only grown by about 3.9% or so.
Yeah.
So I think the shift in expenditure towards capital and infrastructure-led growth is important. And my last point is, whilst all of those matrices are pointing in a positive direction, the Deputy Minister and I will agree that the quality of spend is now what matters. Execution has been our challenge, so we need to execute these projects. And then we need to deal with corruption and crime and the illicit economy.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think a point was made that the single fastest growing item line in that budget was that capital spend, so an important number to celebrate. Busi, let me come to you. Your initial comment suggested that you found the budget moving in the right direction, and you spoke of fiscal credibility. Please give us your assessment and whether perhaps you have changed your view after having a second look at that budget, or you stick with that initial take that maybe the Deputy Minister is right. Maybe this is that turning point.
I definitely think that this is definitely the turning point. It was a very credible budget. It was a very pragmatic budget. It was a budget that was cognizant of the pressures that the average South Africans are actually facing. It was a budget that committed to the reform agenda, which is very important. So I think in terms of where we're sitting as a country, Godfrey, and I agree with the Deputy Minister, we seem to have found the right formula and blueprint of how to turn this economy around. And we can see that the fiscal discipline, the fiscal consolidation, is actually starting to pay off, and we're starting to reap those rewards, as it were. So I really think that where we find ourselves at the moment is really just a function of continuing to do more of the same. We just need to do it at a much more faster pace, as it were. So I really think that when you now have a government which understands that this private-public partnership is one of the key ingredients, to solving the challenges that we have as an economy, that is brilliant, because it is precisely through that partnership, it is precisely through those interventions that we are actually starting to see the progress that the budget manifested yesterday, as it were. So it's great that the government is actually committing to reforms. I do worry, however, and I was very glad, Deputy Minister, that the President actually clarified the government's position in as far as the Eskom unbundling is concerned. I worry, though, still, that the reforms are actually under threat. I worry that institutions like Eskom and Transnet are starting to dig in their heels. I worry that they think that now that we're out of the woods, we no longer have load shedding. What is the point of this reform in the first place? I worry about the Eskom legal challenge that is actually underway. I worry that this Eskom unbundling, Eskom legal challenge was not the first. We are going to see a whole lot of those attempts that are actually going to come through. And I really think that it's going to be important for government to hold the line on this one, because I really think that this is a function of ensuring that we can keep the confidence of the domestic community, business community, investor community, credit rating agencies, and so forth and so forth. Because we cannot, and this is not a business reform agenda, by the way, these are government reforms. Right. So you can't start on a particular path as government and halfway through you decide to change the rules of the game. It doesn't actually sit well from a confidence perspective. You're currently sitting with about 2 trillion rands of generation investor pipeline. What are those investors supposed to do when you decide to change the rules of the game midway? So I really think that there's something that we're going to have to guard against, as government and as a country in terms of the commitment to reforms. But I think we also need to look beyond the reforms themselves and understand that the path that we're on leads to sustainability that we need as a country. From the perspective, Godfrey, that the reforms that we're implementing and the path that we're on is an intervention that seeks to de-risk this economy from politics. Because once you have private sector participation in the critical sectors of the economy, once you have the generation of electricity no longer just dependent on Eskom, it means that if you were to have a state capture 2.0, if you were to have the wrong president like we had in President Jacob Zuma again, it means that you're going to be sitting with a president that presides over less, sitting with a president that actually presides over less government. The government is not going to be as dominant as it was, right? Because you have private sector participation in the critical sectors of the economy. It means we'll still be able to generate electricity even if they were to loot Eskom Blue, It means that we'd still be able to take goods out of the market, or to the market, even if you were to loot Transnet, Brown, It's important because it also gives... We stand on podiums and we say South Africa is open for investment. But it's concerning to the investor and the international community that the changes that we've made as a country, are they actually going to be sustainable? Are we going to be able to hold the line? Yeah. And I think if you have the energy reforms, being the first reforms that we've undertaken, as successful as they might have been, if we start to now capitulate on them, is there confidence that the subsequent reforms are actually going to go through as they have actually done. So I think I like this aspect of de-risking the economy from politics, because then you will have the economy functioning as it should, irrespective of what happens in politics. And when you look at it from a business perspective, this is what we do all the time. It doesn't matter whether the CEO is there or not. You have interventions and systems in place that ensure that the business continues to run, irrespective of who is at the helm. The reforms are precisely that intervention and that mechanism for the South African economy. We are putting systems in place that will ensure that this economy and this country can be able to function, whether or not, get the MK party and Zuma back into office.
There's only one Mbusi Mavuso. It's an important point you make, and it's a point that came up. There was a conference at the beginning of the week organized by Standard Bank, and that point came up as a key point in Zambia's story towards economic reform, where they were also speaking about this kind of projects where they are built around a political campaign, and then when the political regime changes, you now find perhaps those projects are no longer funded to the extent that they were before. And therefore, it's not just a South African conversation, it's an African conversation, an important one. But I also wanted to make the point that I hope that we don't also have a wrong commissioner, because I wanted to remind you the commissioner is on his way out. We need the right commissioner to succeed the commissioner when he comes along. Zinhle, let me come to you. I want to talk a little bit about perhaps what excited you in the budget, but feel free as well to say what you found short in terms of that budget, celebrated as we are doing.
Thank you, Godfrey. For us, what we found exciting is the elevation of illicit. I mean, the Commissioner has pointed that out. The illicit economy, we've been very vocal as a sector to say government regulations, enforcement really need to follow through, because decisions that we make as a country are what impacted. I mean, this is just an outcome. Illicit and counterfeit economy is an outcome of decisions that were made during COVID. And we are seeing them coming through now and impacting South Africa from an economic perspective, impacting employment for our people. Because this is, I mean, like a number of my members are shutting down businesses, and because decisions, regulations, policy for us must be followed through by the right regulatory instrument that is fit for purpose. Because we continue as a country to put in good policy documents, but we do not follow through. So that is what excited us. Also, with regards to a number of duties and levies that we have, we've been advocating for a long time to say, can we have a proper instrument of how these decisions of increases of levies are being done? And for the first time in this budget, it is based on inflation. So that is really, really good. But I think we need to be mindful at the same time to say, increasing duties and levies, are they being used as an instrument of generating revenue for government, or are they having for a specific purpose? Because we really like government, in this case National Treasury, to, if they say we're collecting a levy, we're charging a fee, whether it's a sugar tax as we all know it, or is it a plastic levy that my members are collecting from the South Africans? It needs to be used for that specific purpose. These funds end up in a black hole in SARS, and we do not know where they're going. They don't end up in the Department of Health. They don't end up in the Department of Environmental Affairs, because that's what they were set for. So government must be honest and say, you know what, we don't want to raise taxes, but we're raising levies.
So you're suggesting that each specific levy be ring-fenced to the purpose that it's been actually implemented for, and that's be done transparently.
That must be transparent. I mean, fuel levy is increasing again. Yes, based on inflation, but the value chain impact needs to be really understood. You could be giving relief to consumers like myself, like all of us here, to say we're getting a relief in terms of the individual tax brackets, but we're going to be paying more on fuel levy. Fuel levy consists of 33%, a third of the petrol price. So these are all issues that government, I think for us, let's not, I think we had a discussion earlier on with the commissioner. It's like we need to think about systems thinking to say these decisions that we are having, we're doing now, what is the impact, positive or negative? What could be possibility that we need to see? Because regulatory environment is not following through. We have issues right now with the foot and mouth disease. We are vaccinating, which is great. The consequence of that vaccination, because policy is not coming through, regulation is not coming through. We have milk that we cannot export. It's sitting in the country. We have markets that are like, bring the milk, South Africa. South Africa is saying, no, the milk cannot go out because we have regulations that are preventing the milk that has been vaccinated, that is testing as if it has foot and mouth disease, because if you vaccinate, you're putting a virus. So government says this milk cannot go out, but other countries are saying we can, as long as it's pasteurized and it's UHT, we'll accept it. But our policy instruments are preventing that. Department of Agriculture is not really thinking through in terms of how do we make sure we're vaccinating. What is the impact at the value chain and from an economic perspective?
Yeah, I'm going to ask the Deputy Minister to pick up on some of those points as we go along. But let me bring in David here into the conversation. David, one of the things that I've been hearing a lot from some people, and I want your thoughts obviously overall on the tax proposals in the budget and the impact that you see, is this suggestion of a concerted drive to make it easier to do business in South Africa by reducing the cost of doing business for SMMEs. I haven't had reference from any of my speakers here before. I don't know whether that stood out for you.
Yeah, it did, Godfrey. I think the thing that stood out the most for me was obviously that the 20 billion of tax revenue that had been penciled in last year's budget wasn't extracted. I think it's a good thing that it wasn't. The perennial target for that would have been the personal income tax brackets, which probably wouldn't have been adjusted for inflation, but it, I think, would have been wrong to not adjust them again, because we've got the highest personal income tax burden as a percentage of GDP amongst upper middle income countries in the world now. That was noted at 2021 already, and things have gotten worse because there was no adjustment for the past 2 years. It would have been 3 in a row. So I was very relieved about that, and I'm sure everyone was here as well. There was limited relief given to SMMEs in the budget. You know, one of the things was the capital gains tax exclusion for small business owners selling their shares or selling their businesses was increased. The turnover tax thresholds, moving them around, I don't think is going to make that much difference, because there hasn't been that great an uptake in the turnover tax for various reasons, and I don't think this is going to be a game changer sufficiently enough to mean that businesses now start adopting the turnover tax. The increase in the VAT registration threshold was good, from 1 million to 2.3. That's quite significant, because that has become a burden for a lot of smaller businesses that would prefer not to necessarily be VAT registered. So those are but obviously the small business sector, I'm sure we'd all agree, is a very, very important driver for economic growth overall. So it is very important that we make business, that we increase the ease of doing business for that sector of the economy as a whole. Yeah.
So material or not so material for you?
I don't think it's that material, really. I don't think that the changes are going to make that much of a difference. You know, the various thresholds that were increased for smaller businesses, no, I don't think it's, unfortunately, not enough.
Sure.
Yeah, I think maybe the whole tax model around small business maybe needs to be rethought to make the whole thing more effective.
Well, let's ask the Deputy Minister. Deputy Minister, your opportunity to respond to the various points raised. I'll try to remember some of the issues that were raised by the others, but perhaps top level from what you remember, what that was spoken, that speaks to your portfolio.
Yeah, you can't miss his bussy. And I agree with a lot of things that she said, but where I part company, it's on the politics. For me, politics is who get what and how. And politics is everywhere. It's in the private sector, it's in families, in churches, because it's about who gets what and how. And there's right politics and there's wrong politics, where you say you're getting things on the basis of some irrelevant criteria, gender, race, geography, and all that. So we do need to distinguish, right? The politics of Zoom, I don't believe in them. That's where I agree with her. But politics, we can't take out politics in our life. But I think the important point she's making, which I agree with, is that we can't be state dependent for us to live as human beings, for energy, for Transnet and all that. And just to assure her that I think, and I'm glad that you keep on, because we need that pressure, right? For us to be kept on our toes, that guys move faster on these reforms. But I want to assure you that I think the president, and I, mainly because I lead politically Operation Vulindlela, president is very, very determined to get these reforms through. He put together a task team to accelerate the unbundling. There's 3 months within which it needs to report on the unbundling. And of course, the Electricity Amendment Act said that we need to establish the TSO, the Transmission System Operator, by 2029. We're not waiting for 2029. I do think that the president has given us a date that this thing ought to have been done by 2027. It's important here. And Transnet as well. I agree with you that there have been some resistance within Transnet, people not wanting to move insofar as the reforms are concerned. I remember when we said, look, we need to issue an RFP for a third-party access on the rail, and people issued a RFP that said you can only have access for 2 years. Really, that was some kind of passive resistance, and the president came in and said, no, this must not be allowed. And I'm very confident that under Minister Barbara Creasy, there's some acceleration there, but you need Sisbusi's voice, because if you don't have it, people relax. You need her to be. And again, the commissioner has mentioned that we, insofar as expenditure is concerned, we have increased our expenditure insofar as infrastructure is concerned. We've increased our expenditure by 9.7%. in terms of capital expenditure and the wage employee compensation of employee by 4.4%. 5 years ago, compensation of employees was very high, unsustainable wage bill, SOE, bailouts, and so on and so on. We've turned the corner in that regard. We'll be spending 1 trillion rand in the next 3 years insofar as infrastructure is concerned. And SOEs themselves, I think almost half of that amount will be spent by the state-owned entities. But we know that the infrastructure finance gap is too huge in South Africa. And that's where, again, I agree with Sisbusi that we can't depend on the state, not only because the state does not even have the resources that are required to do this infrastructure. We need the private sector to invest with us in the infrastructure. And as a result, we have set up a number of great incentives to crowd in the private sector. I disagreed with my colleague somewhere who were saying prescribe, prescribe. I said, no, you need incentives. You can't do prescription. It has not worked. We need to set the right incentive for the infrastructure. An example is a credit guarantee scheme. We need around 400 billion for our transmission, 14,000 kilometer transmission infrastructure as a result of the liberalization of the energy market, in which a lot of investors have invested in generation, and you need to get that power onto the grid ESCOM's balance sheet, I nearly said it's screwed, but they can't, they can't afford that. Well, it's gotten better since we took over some of the debt, and it is their balance sheet, and therefore they could invest in maintenance and so on. So we did something there, but they are not out of the wood yet. So Sisbusi, warning, it's always very, very useful. But we need such amount of money. We set up a guarantee scheme, a credit guarantee scheme, which will be operational by July this year. It's basically an insurance to de-risk the money, private money, that should be flowing into the infrastructure for the transmission. We've made it easier for public-private partnership insofar as the infrastructure is concerned, but we still need to enforce the user pay principle. The Gauteng crew, if it's here, please, when you put infrastructure and you say pay, please do pay. Because you refuse to pay for the e-tolls and then you mess us up. So as we set up this, because investors are not investing for charity, they want returns.
Yeah.
So whatever infrastructure that we're going to put in place, they need to see that the cash flow, the future cash flow, make a lot of sense. And if the economic fundamental, the discount rate, become reasonable, it's a win-win situation. We're able to attract private capital insofar as this. So, but I fully agree with it's just parting company on a few issues.
Yeah.
But overall, I fully agree with.
For sure. So let's keep talking. Let's talking to Sisbusi. Let's keep making noise.
It's important. Otherwise, we fall asleep.
I've got a couple of points that I wanted to follow up with you that came from Zinhle, and also the point about the SMME reform. David is suggesting you have tried, but it's not enough. Your comment. And then secondly, the issue of ring-fencing the levies and making sure that the money that's raised is actually spent on them. Is there political opposition to that, or is that something that the government is willing to look at?
So there's two things. The SMMEs, I think, in addition to the tax reforms that we've undertaken, we really need to do more. There are a whole range of initiatives in the SMME ecosystem. Municipalities are doing their own thing, and some of the bylaws that they have, they undermine the SMMEs, the growth of the SMMEs. So there is a need, and I know the Department of Small Business that's doing a lot insofar as dealing with the barriers for the growth of the SMMEs. It could be regulatory, it's finance, the market. And from our side, on the tech side, we've done a lot of, we will continue to do a lot of work in that regard. Now, ring fencing, the money, there's a political will already. And I'll give you an example with the metro trading system. You know, the reason why we've got a serious water crisis in Joburg. It's when you pay water for a service as a resident, that money goes into a big pot called the municipal budget. I mean, the minister also mentioned, he has a sentence in the budget speech that shows that the revenue that Joburg Water generates in a year is 9 billion, but they spend only 1 billion on infrastructure. So in other words, the cow that is generating this milk is not fed for it to continue to give out the milk and bear more calves for the economy to grow, for us to continue to receive the water. So the reform that we are undertaking as National Treasury through the metro trading system is to have accountability, financial accountability of these trading services. In other words, Joburg Water needs to have its own financials. We need to see the bottom line, and the top line, we need to see the cash flows, the income statement, so that we've got a see-through.
Yeah.
And the citizens as well can also ask questions, why are you not investing?
Yeah.
Look at the revenue that this entity is generating,
Yeah.
but in terms of your cash flow, we don't see you investing in the infrastructure that is critical for generating growth and providing the services to the citizens. But this will also enable these trading services to go out in the market and raise money, cheaper money, because I think as investors will have a see-through that the cash flows are great, are positive. The cost of capital for them can also be lower. At the moment, it's risky. They raise bonds, but you have no see-through on whether this money will be paid back or not. And as a result, you guys, you manage risk and enhance returns. And if the risk is high, you increase the premium. So this is an important reform, not only to attract private money into, but as to your point, we've got to ring-fence that money so that you don't have cross-subsidization for this entity. It's even worse now in the context of the coalitions, because a member of this party, which I shall not mention its name, they will say, no, we have promised our constituency kindergartens. No, I have no issue with kindergartens. But that money that is generated from this trading service, Joburg Water, City Power, it goes into some budget and something that is not really enabling these entities to generate enough revenue. So it gets worse in the context of, and messy in the context of local government. So these reforms that we're undertaking, and there's a political will. And I think we agreed, ourselves, the ANC and the DA, on this reform. So from the political reform and willingness point of view, there's a political will.
Absolutely. So it's an interesting point, because it was also raised actually in an interview I had with the CEO of the South African Local Government Association. One of the complaints he was making was that we are given mandates where there's no funding, and we are supposed to perform miracles. How are we supposed to do that? So hopefully that's part of the white paper that's underway now, and that can be sorted out as well. All right. So let me move on to the Commissioner. Commissioner, we're going to use you because you are on your way out, so you can speak frankly.
Have I ever not spoken frankly?
Are you getting enough resources as you do your work? Or is now AI making it easier for you to do your work to the extent where you are okay with the 14,000 men and women that you have at SARS who continue to do their work very diligently?
I mean, the simple answer is we are still under-resourced.
Sure.
And the Deputy Minister knows that, the Finance Minister knows that. And I don't want to speak to the history of it, and I understand that we are fiscally constrained in many ways. However, when we speak about the tax gap, not the debt stock, it's a huge focus on the debt stock, and the debt stock eventually, if we get that better, will come down. But the real money on the floor is the tax gap. VAT probably the most significant candidate of about 200 billion tax gap. Totally, all of the different studies have shown that we have a tax gap of anywhere between 350 and 600 billion rand. That's quite an important number. And what we need to be very clear about is what is the institutional investment required that will identify where exactly that gap is, because you can't go about with a wide, pea shooter hoping you're going to hit the right. You have to be laser focused on where it is, because inadvertently when you harass honest taxpayers and let dishonest taxpayers get away, it's counterintuitive, because you then earn the disrespect, the distrust of honest taxpayers, and the crooks sit and laugh at you. So when we say we need to adequately resource SARS, it's to build the human capability. So, for example, in specialized tax areas where you need transfer pricing specialists, where you need wealth structuring specialists, people who understand how wealthy people organize their wealth. You can't have a basic auditor and expect that they understand complex financial arrangements. So in that area, we are underinvested. In dealing with the criminal economy, we need deeper forensic investigative skills. We compete with financial services sector, and therefore our reward structures should allow us to attract and retain the right level of skills. So it's not a frivolous request when we say we have underinvested in our people. In addition to that, we have to transform our workforce to be future ready, to be AI fluent, to learn to comfortably coexist with AI agents who will in some ways take over the work that people do. And we are making decent progress in terms of understanding that and progressing. I mean, last year, or this financial year, about 6 million people didn't have to fill in a return. That's the dividend of investing in technology and AI. And because of the rapid change in the environment, it's like running on a treadmill. You have to run just fast enough to stay on the treadmill. Running is not enough. You have to adjust your speed, otherwise you fall off the back. And I think my plea has always been that SARS should be seen as an investment center and not a cost center for government. And we comfortably can yield a return of easily between every cent that's invested in SARS, comfortably 10 times money back, sure, and up to 100 times money back. I mean, the current cost to income ratio of SARS, banks would salivate at it. It's about 7 cents in every 100 cents that we collect. So SARS is efficient.
Versus the average 50.
Yeah, SARS is efficient and effective, but woefully under-resourced for the size of the prize. And so that's why our plea has always been the 7 billion, which has been targeted over 3 years to reduce the debt stock, is narrowly focused on a contingent liability on the balance sheet of the state. But that's not sustainable. The sustainable investment is building deep institutional integrity that can deal with the tax gap, not just the debt stock.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you. That's why we seated you next to the Deputy Minister, so he could hear you clearly. I want us to focus on the actions that are required to make sure that we do not lose this moment in the sun. That's my next question to our 3 remaining speakers. I'd like from you, David, Zinhle, Busi, just perhaps 1 point or 2 points that you think are key for the government to concentrate on in order to keep the reform momentum going.
Well, I think that the most important thing is, we've been a bit fortunate, I think, with the prices of minerals.
Thank you, President Donald Trump.
So I think that's brought in a lot of revenue, but I think that this moment mustn't be lost, exactly as what you're saying. And I think that the focus must be, as the Commissioner said, on closing the tax gap. I think there must be an investment to try and keep that revenue coming in. Because, we've had a good year now. We'd have been, I think, having a very different discussion if we hadn't had those tax collections that we did happen to have. And it's not, I think, Commissioner, as you said, it's not all fortuitous. I'm not saying it all is, but a large part of it, I think, it has got to do with those windfalls. So I think a big focus has to be on closing that tax gap to get permanent revenue increases.
Absolutely. Zinhle?
Thank you. For us, I think the investment that government has promised in terms of infrastructure, water, road, and electricity, we need to follow through on that. We need to make sure that municipalities are given capability. Water challenges in South Africa are not because we don't have water. It's because of how we are managing. I think the minister, the deputy minister has touched on that. My members are mostly in the food value chain, and you cannot produce food without water. So it's really, we have members that are really struggling with water availability. They had to have water reticulation plants in their factories because the quality of water that is coming from the municipalities is not safe for them to use in their factories. And water for us, it's not the same as electricity because we don't have an alternative. What are we going to use? So government has not really been heading, and we've been talking to government. When we saw that electricity issues are coming along, we're getting a hang of it, we have Business for South Africa structure in place, and we said water. My member said water is an issue. Raise it, and government, at this point, is not a priority. Sure. So I think the voice of business needs to be really heard because we are feeling the stresses immediately. And we are able to communicate that to government. Government needs to, I think the trust deficit needs to be really shortened because we are all here for South Africa. Business, I think government needs to, again, steer away from saying business is profiteering. That's the reason why business exists. And if business exists for profit, it's able to pay taxes, it's able to create employment, it's able to invest in this country. So we need to really have that trust in place to say when we say as business, this is the challenges that we are seeing because we are leaving them. Don't think we are just scrapping at straws. We are talking the truth, and those are the things that along the line as businesses we are seeing. And if government is not putting infrastructure in place, is not taking heed on these warnings that we are saying, we're going to see it coming through. Right now, we have issues of water, and we've been writing letters to ministers. And this always comes like my board was like, are we going to a new war with old weapons of writing letters? What do we need to do as a sector? So, because government, we still, we write letters to ministers, we write everything else. They do not take us into account because I think the biggest misconception is that business is not for the country, but we really are.
Check your inbox, Deputy Minister. Check your inbox. Busi?
So I spoke earlier on about the blueprint that we've actually established as a country in terms of where we are and to ensure that we actually keep this momentum. So I really think that we've got a formula that works, as I've said. You have made the necessary changes in SARS, in Eskom, in Transnet. Now we actually need to maintain those. So the institutional strength for me is the one thing in answering your question, Godfrey, in terms of what is it that we need to do to ensure that we actually keep the momentum. Institutional strength. But remember, that institutional strength comes with having the right people at the helm.
Right.
Tom Moyane, Edward Kiswita. Chalk and cheese, right? So, but also, honestly, but then you see, that is why Deputy Minister says politics will do whatever. Politics matters precisely here. Edward didn't appoint himself. Was appointed by Cyril.
Good politics.
And yes, right? And the wrong politics. You see, you appoint a thief president, you appoint a thief commissioner. And I think that is and we cannot therefore, no, but that is precisely what we need to protect this. We need to protect. We really cannot go back to, and the president is now going to appoint another commissioner. You know, it's Johnston right there. Johnston's going to be you, right? I hope hope so. So I really think that it really becomes, important that we actually safeguard these institutions. Because then, if you don't have, you safeguard them by putting the right people. Because if you don't have the right people, then the wheels come off, like we have seen. So institutional strength, if we want to keep this country and economy going, institutional strength by safeguarding it with the right people.
Thank you, Missy. Thank you. But I gotta say, we've got two strong ones, right? One is sitting right next to you. It's been rebuilt, it's been made robust, absolutely without question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The Reserve Bank, I think, is another
Reserve
very
Bank,
strong
absolutely.
institution that's certainly been keeping the lights on. So we appreciate that. But thank you for your points. Deputy Minister, the final question to you before we come to a close and then move on to our question and answers after our live broadcast session ends, is around the fiscal rule. So this story I pick up on, I had an interview with the IMF last year and they spoke about the importance of this one and how it's worked in other emerging market economies. You adopted a set of principles rather than a single number. A quick explanation.
So firstly, we've always had the fiscal anchor. You're right, we are working on the fiscal rules. Because at the moment, on the monetary side, we have a clear inflation targeting framework, and the fiscal rules now need to articulate deficit issues, debt to GDP. But we said instead of having an annual, that's the proposal we're putting and we're finalizing that conversation. We're suggesting that every administration, when they take over, they need to articulate those issues up front, and they should be held accountable to them. But to Sis Zintle's point about water, we're serious about water, Sis Zintle. Firstly, the second phase of Operation Vulindlela, this reform agenda, we said the central government should have powers to intervene in municipalities that are not able to provide water. Because at the moment, constitutionally, the constitution say the authority to provide water lies with the municipality. And we're saying, yes, we respect the constitution, but we cannot watch and look when water standards, when these municipalities are not providing water which is necessary and imported for the economy. Astral, I became a deputy mayor of Likwa because the Likwa municipality was not providing water. And the prayer that Astral made in court was that Tito Mboweni, who was a minister, they take over this municipality. And their prayer was heard, and I became a mayor in that municipality by default.
Sure.
And as it always happens, ministers, they give deputy ministers things that they don't like. So I was the municipal mayor there in Lekwa. So out of that experience and many other experiences, we said, no.
Yeah.
We don't have to wait for the court.
Sure.
So again, in the context of the GNU, we agreed that the national government should have powers to take over those functions. But another key reform is the National Resource Agency, Water Resource Agency that we're putting in place, or we've put in place by Act, that it should be able to go to the market and raise money for water resource, building dams, and so on and so on. So I think we're taking very seriously the issue around water. The last thing that I will add, Sisbus, is that I agree with you. Institutions matter, fully agree. Individuals matter, but your voice matters. Civil society is critical.
Absolutely.
I can tell you, if it wasn't for the business, civil society standing up during the state capture period, this country would have gone worse. So you need the civil society, and that's why in other jurisdictions, I'll give you the example of Mobutu Sese Seko. There was no civil society. He could do as he wanted because civil society was absent in that. So yourself, Godfrey, your voices in the media is quite critical. So these three things are important. Individuals matter in these institutions, But these institutions on their own,
Yeah.
they require these voices. These individuals can be overwhelmed,
Sure.
defeated in the palace if people outside the palace are quiet.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks to that. Thank you, Deputy Minister. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I am going to give Bonga Mokoena, the CEO of BDO, an opportunity to ask a question before we round up, and then we will open the floor to a question and answers. Bonga, please.
Thank you very much, Godfrey. I think I'm not going to ask a question, but I'm going to make a comment, one or two comments. I think we really welcome the overall positive budget by the Minister of Finance yesterday, and I think it's quite exciting. And I want to just say that going forward, so where to from here? Basically, as business, as private sector, we have a vested interest, in the economic vibrancy of this country. As also the Deputy Chair of Business Leadership South Africa, we have been engaging with government and collaborating with government on various fronts on economic reforms which are so much needed, and we need those to be, sped up. And Operation Vulindlela too. I mean, Busi and I were actually hosting Rory Dixon the day before yesterday, and really still having conversation around how do we maintain the frameworks that we have. But the economic reforms, municipal reform is quite critical, because if the local government is not working, the economy is not going to work, and over and above the challenges of water. So we take an interest, and I think all hands needs to be on deck. We need to make sure that there's sustainability of the frameworks that have been built. As South Africa has turned the corner, all the economic fundamentals are in place. We need to maintain those, as Busi has mentioned, the Deputy Minister of Finance has mentioned, Commissioner Kezueta has mentioned. We need to make sure that all these frameworks, we make them work. Leadership is important. Yeah. Crime and corruption requires focus by all of us. And there's so much money that is lost. If we can save half of that money that goes to crime and corruption, which is leakage, this country will be totally different.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We require leadership. We require leadership that kind of works beyond just political cycles. That's what we need as a country. I think these are my comments. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Bonga. Thank you. Thank you to all of you. Thank you also to my panel. I understand the Deputy Minister has to leave, so he may not be able to take any more questions. But for the live broadcast, thank you for watching, and I'm certainly hoping that you can continue to follow the conversation on our online platforms.